This is TWiT.
I'm a little worried about Section 230. Are you worried about Section 230? Now Joe Biden is going after it. Joe did a interview with the New York Times editorial board. There's a very long, detailed transcript. In much of it, I was impressed by his command of the issues and his thoughtful, suggestions and policies. But then as you get down towards the bottom, they start talking, and boy, the bottom is a long way down. I need to scroll fast. They start talking about Facebook, Cambridge Analytica, and the problems that Facebook potentially is creating by allowing candidates to lie in political ads on Facebook. Charlie Wartzel asks, in October, your campaign sent a letter to Facebook regarding an ad that falsely claimed you blackmailed Ukrainian officials to not investigate your son. I'm curious, did that experience dealing with Facebook and their power, did that change the way you see the power of tech platforms right now? He says, Biden, I've never been a fan of Facebook, as you probably know. I've never been a big Zuckerberg fan. I think he's a real problem. He knows better. From my perspective, I'm of the view that not only should we be worrying about the concentration of power, we should worry about the lack of privacy and this is where it starts to get a little problematic for me, them being exempt. The New York Times isn't exempt. You can't write something you know to be false and exempt from being sued, but he can. Mark Zuckerberg can.
But he didn't write it.
He didn't write it, and that's not what 230 is all about. 230...
Well, and the last sentence, says the discourse would be improved if we all take a moment to actually read the text of CDA 230. Well, maybe we should start with Joe Biden reading the text of 230.
This really worries me.
He clearly doesn't understand it.
He says he's effectively saying that whatever appears on Facebook is the responsibility of Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook. They're a publisher, and Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act says online platforms aren't held liable for things their users post on them, any more than the phone company is held liable for the conversation you have on the phone. That is really important to protecting the internet. If for instance, I'm responsible for anything anybody says on our forums or in our chat room or in our twit.social Mastodon, I'm going to take them all down because I can't be held responsible for it. I'm not. It's an open forum. And it's impossible to monitor that. Imagine now, multiply that times 1.5 billion users. What he's saying is, Charlie responds, that's a pretty foundational law of the modern internet. That's right, says Biden, exactly right, and it should be revoked. It should be revoked because it's not merely an internet company, it's propagating falsehoods they know to be false. And we should be setting standards like the Europeans do with privacy. Boy, I hope somebody, maybe a little bit hipper, a little bit younger, maybe somebody who's read the Section 230.
He was in the Senate when that was passed.
Yeah.
So, but unfortunately,
I understand his ire.
Don't read the bills they vote on.
I know. I understand his ire, but honestly, this is much more complex than that. He compares, he talks about the Luddites. He does say something interesting. I mean, he says, things happen. Technology comes along. Every industrial revolution, every major technological breakthrough, every single one. He says there's an arrogance. He says we're in the fourth technological revolution, the hardest speech I've ever had to make. I've asked to speak at the World Economic Forum. And he says every other revolution we've had technologically, it's taken somewhere between 6 years, this I don't disagree with, between 6 years and a generation for government to come in and level the playing field again. Remember the Luddites smashing the machinery in the Midlands? That was their answer when the culture was changing. Same thing with television, same thing before that with radio, same thing. But this is gigantic, and it's a responsibility of government to make sure it's not abused. I don't disagree with that. But it starts by reading CDA 230 and understanding why it's so important.
Right. And, I think that the answer, not that there necessarily is an answer, but to the degree there is one, is not repealing 230, but what is the real issue here? The issue is that it's trying to manage this content, trying to moderate this content, cannot possibly scale up to something the size of Facebook or YouTube or any of these other major platforms. The problem is these platforms have simply gotten too big. We've allowed them to grow out of control, and there's no way that we can manage that. And I think we need to start moving away from these enormous platforms and start getting back to smaller, more constrained platforms.
That's why we have a
like
TWiT
the TWiT
forum.
community.
Yeah, that's why we do it, and TWiT Social. Go ahead.
On the other side, though, if you're being paid to put up advertising that has libelous statements on that, shouldn't you then be able to be prosecuted for libel since you are putting that up and you've been paid for it, which would be different than having a chat room or having just Mary that posted this whatever article that Mary wanted to post?
Historically, we have not, for instance, regulated that in broadcast. Because what you don't want to do is put the broadcasters or the FCC in the position of determining what is truth and what is false. Because then there's issues. It's not always the case that you could say, well, no, that's a lie. And so what you don't want is government to say, okay, it's up to you, Mark Zuckerberg, to prevent lies on your platform. That actually gives him an immense amount of power. And so we don't regulate that in the United States. I don't know what they do in Canada, but in the U.S., we don't regulate that in broadcast.
You see, the only thing is that my thought is that if, Citizens United and companies or people, if you can, if you put up a lie about me and I could sue you personally for libel because you wrote something that I could prove under a court of law was a lie and the court said so, then you should be able to do that the same way with a company, which may make companies more careful about what they place up and not just go to the biggest dollar.
But you see, that's right there in the court of law. That's going to be a problem. Because if you try each one of these, those trials will end in a year or two, by which time 25,000 ads have appeared in the meantime, and the election's over. So that's too slow a means. I just don't know if there's any effective
and
means.
It's also not a guarantee that you're going to get an accurate outcome either. I mean, look at the recent libel case against Elon Musk for calling that cave diver a pedo.
Yeah.
He walked
got away with
that.
Yeah.